Everybody wanna sing. Speak up, S-P-E-A-K. Speak up.
In this multimedia issue of Speak Up, Future Shock Special Reading, London Life, a World Capital, War on Iraq, The Real Reasons, September 11th, Time to Remember, British Food, a lot more edible than before, a short story by David Spanier, and a song by The Coral. Hi, and welcome to issue 197 of Speak Up. In your computer, you should see the first 4 tracks in multimedia, and all the audio should still play on any CD player. We start on page 4.
Future shock.
Truth or consequences. If you're convinced that a friend is lying to you, then you might want to invest in this new gadget, the Handy Truster Portable Lie Detector. www.handytrusters.com. Using a voice recognition chip, this device detects stress levels in a voice and then displays an apple to indicate the truth or a worm for a falsity. Costing $35, the Handy Truster claims to have an 84% accuracy rate. Get ready. Given current world affairs, the U.S. government deemed it an absolute necessity, a website devoted to instructing Americans on how to behave in the case of a terrorist attack. Ready.gov is just that, a website from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and based on this premise: terrorism forces us to make a choice. Don't be afraid, be ready. Simple and straightforward, this site received 1.1 million visits in its first day and has since been the subject of numerous parodies for its tendency to overstate the obvious. For managers on the move. Advancements in athletic shoes have no limits. The latest novelty comes from Reebok in the form of travel trainers. Designed for frequent travelers who are also passionate exercisers, these running shoes are durable enough for a workout but light enough to be folded and stored thanks to the foam-based material used for their soles. For information, visit www.reebok.com. Who's web-wise? Sweden wins the prize for being the most web-savvy nation according to a recent study by IBM and the British magazine The Economist. Denmark comes in second place, followed by the United States. Absent from the list of the top 15 were France and Italy. Sleeping around. Planning a trip but you're on an extremely tight budget? Then www.sleepinginairports.net is definitely the site for you. Founded in 1996 by Donna McSherry, once a budget traveler herself, this site has been celebrating airport sleeping since July 11, 1996, as its homepage states. Over 1,600 airports are evaluated for their safe and restful sleep environments, with most of these reviews written by people who have actually tried out the experience.
Speak up.
Modern and multicultural, London just keeps getting better and more expensive.
With a population of over 7 million, speaking more than 300 languages, London has become one of the most ethnically diverse cities in the world. Modern multicultural London appears to have it all. Gleaming skyscrapers towering across the waters of the Thames, ancient monuments and buildings, and a mouth-watering array of food, arts and entertainment. Away from Buckingham Palace and Madame Tussauds, however, London is a living, breathing city with everyday urban problems: housing shortages, crime, pollution and an overworked transport system, including the oldest and busiest underground system in the world. Employment is still easy to find, but a large number of Londoners are struggling to earn a salary to match the cost of living in one of the most expensive cities in the world. It is often said that the only genuine Londoners are Cockneys, people born within hearing distance of the Bow Bells in London's East End. Traditionally, this has been a working-class area and home to many immigrant communities over the centuries: Irish, French Huguenots, Jews and, most recently, Bangladeshis. It is a history celebrated by the hugely popular television soap EastEnders, which represents many people's vision of life in one of London's oldest areas. "It's nothing like the East End I knew," laughs 69-year-old Fred Lawrence, who grew up in Stratford and worked in the East End for most of his life. One of 12 children, Fred started work in a match factory, aged 14, and later found a job at the Royal Docks. This is an area unrecognisable today. In recent decades, the working docks have been wiped off the map and replaced by luxury apartments, shopping centres, museums, and London City Airport. Fred shakes his head as he recalls the last days of the docks.
And gradually, as I said, the docks just disappeared from under your nose, really, because it happened so quick, you know what I mean? So you could see, you know, the people was disappearing, you know what I mean? Because they was getting out and the shed was shutting out, and you know, where you go down and see one of the sheds and it was full up with cargo, all of a sudden there's nothing there. And you talk about big sheds, and so you know, what's happening there? Then you had these big meetings and telling, you know, about different things was happening, but you couldn't do nothing about it. You know, we went on strike over it, and we protested against it. But you know as well as me, you can't stop progress.
Now retired and living just outside London, Fred makes a weekly visit to his brother in Stratford. He will always be an East Ender, but Fred is clearly bewildered by the transformation of his old neighbourhood and feels that it has changed too much. But change is precisely what the writer and academic Mike Phillips finds most exciting about London. He arrived here from his native Guyana in 1955 and has witnessed the migration of various ethnic groups into and out of the city through the years.
I was brought up 2 streets away from here in Haringey, yeah? And if you go out there and look at the geographical landscape, what you see is a kind of archaeology of change in London. When I came here, it was a largely white working class district. It then became more and more heavily Greek and Turkish Cypriot. And, you know, I moved away from here for a long time. When I came back, I was astonished at the way that the High Street, Turnpike Lane, and other places around here had mutated into a sort of bazaar of cultures. You know, you walk down there and you get all your Middle Eastern vegetables, you get West Indian things, you get Indian things. You know, just lately you begun to get an admixture of East European. The social composition, you know, you go down the shopping mall and walk around and it looks like everybody in this district is mixed race. I mean, that's not actually true, but it's just incredibly cosmopolitan.
Mike Phillips believes that London's capacity to change has helped the city not only survive, but thrive as it moves into the 21st century. He uses the central theme of migration in both his fiction and non-fiction, and his home borough of Haringey, North London, features prominently in his early crime novels. Crime is one of Londoners' biggest concerns. Recent falls in the monthly figures cannot conceal the fact that there are over 1 million recorded crimes in the London region each year. CCTV cameras have become a standard feature of contemporary London, and especially around the city or square mile. This was where the Romans first bridged the Thames in AD 43, and today is where the 250,000 people working in the pulsing financial heart of the City of London generate an astonishing 3/4 of Britain's GNP. An equity derivatives analyst for an investment bank in Fenchurch Street, 23-year-old Rajiv Bhattacharya, was born in Wimbledon, South London. The financial markets open early, so he has to be at work by 7:30 a.m. Fortunately, the 2-bedroom flat in Bethnal Green he bought with his brother is within walking distance of the city. Although he enjoys London and its lively West End, Rajiv is dismayed by the prohibitive prices here. Although he still needs a flatmate to help cover the costs of the mortgage, he considers himself to be fortunate.
It is quite expensive to live around the city. and unfortunately prices keep going up. So even though my mortgage isn't so bad, so I had a bit of help buying the flat with my brother. Like we bought it together. Property prices around there are ridiculous at the moment for what you get. What you pay, you get very little. And renting around there is a lot. I mean, a lot of people I work with commute in from Kent, commute in from about an hour's south and north. Very few live actually close enough to walk, so I'm lucky in that respect.
London's property market has been accelerating dangerously for years, and a one-bedroom flat here can easily cost more than £100,000. The government has introduced schemes to help key workers, such as nurses, teachers and police officers, get a foot on the property ladder. One of those fortunate enough to have bought a house, Dublin-born Derval Fitzgerald, is an art and media studies teacher at Eaglesfield School for Boys in Woolwich. She describes this area of south-east London, which offers stunning views of the city's skyline, as exceedingly poor. Half of Derval's pupils speak a language other than English as their mother tongue. Like many people living here, Derval finds London quite insular and impersonal. It can be hard to meet people, but she explains that she has always enjoyed exploring different areas of the city.
I liked London, but then a lot of people who don't live in London use London more than Londoners themselves. So when I was living over in Ireland, I came over to London regularly, just to visit galleries, just to use the art facilities, just to appreciate the city. So when I came over here first, even though I was kind of working, I was a student, so I was kind of on very basic money, and I was living out in Plumstead, which was basically out in the sticks. It's well, in terms of transport, it's not very well networked. So I was using the bus. So the first few weeks I was taking bus journeys of an hour and a half into the centre to use the film, to use the cinemas and everything like that. But I just did it because I just wanted to devour the city and devour its facilities. But I always liked it. I never had a fear of it as a big city because I knew it very well from when I was a student, etc. Yeah.
Transport is a major headache for most Londoners. Ken Livingstone, Mayor of London, recently took the step of introducing congestion charges to reduce the amount of road traffic at peak times. He has also invested heavily in additional buses. Traditional red London buses can be seen everywhere in the city. But Derval Fitzgerald finds that cycling is the quickest way to get around, if sometimes dangerous. She was recently knocked off her bike in an accident. Like many young Londoners, she is now thinking of getting a scooter. Scooters are, of course, exempt from the traffic congestion charges.
Speak up.
The Iraq War is the subject of this interview with British writer Nafeez Mossadegh Ahmed. There has been considerable debate about the so-called real reasons behind the decision to go to war with Iraq. Officially, it was about making the world a safer place from terrorism and weapons of mass destruction, but many observers were sceptical about this, not least a young British writer by the name of Nafeez Mossadegh Ahmed, whose book The War on Freedom, How and Why America Was Attacked on September 11, 2001, raised serious concerns about the country's intelligence and air defence systems prior to and during those dramatic events. A Speak Up called Nafeez Mossadegh Ahmed at the Institute for Policy Research and Development in Brighton, England, and asked him why the United States had turned its attention to Iraq after having failed to find Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan.
The Iraq War is motivated by a very, very urgent geostrategic consideration. There was a report from CBS News where Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld was basically on the day, 5 hours after 9/11 attacks. Apparently he'd been sitting in his office receiving lots of intelligence memos and things. And he scribbled down a memo which basically said, get all the best info fast. See whether good enough to hit SH, which was basically an abbreviation for Saddam Hussein, as well as UBL, which was Osama bin Laden. There was another statement he made in the same memo, which was go massive, sweep it all up, things connected and not connected. In other words, exploit 9/11, exploit this climate of fear to basically drag in as many issues that we can to pursue our interests, including, of course, this prominent issue of Saddam Hussein and Iraq. They've been wanting to go into Iraq for so long. There is a think tank called the Project for the New American Century, which had been established in the late 1990s by the same people who are in the current administration, Dick Cheney, Rumsfeld, President Bush's brother Jeb Bush, Louis Libby, a lot of other officials in the current White House cabinet were basically behind this think tank. I think it was in 97 to 98, they published basically a study which was not distributed to the public, a study which talked about their grand plans basically for American power. They talked about establishing a Pax Americana, and that's a direct quote, throughout the globe. They talked about the need to prevent any other powers from even aspiring to rival American power in any other way, even aspiring to a greater role themselves in world affairs. It named very specific regions of the world where the United States government had interest, and it specified the issue of Iraq and the need to establish an American force presence in the Persian Gulf. Specifically, it said that that need transcends the issue of Saddam Hussein. I mean, in one fell swoop, they're making very clear in this document that it's not about Saddam Hussein, and it's not about his weapons of mass destruction. It's not about any threat that he poses or may not pose. It's just about getting a force presence in the Persian Gulf, essentially to control a very strategic region of the world, where this region has, according to known reserves, the second largest oil reserves in the world. And oil analysts say that there are unexplored reserves, which could mean that Iraq has more combined oil reserves than Russia, all these other countries combined, more than Saudi Arabia, which has the most oil reserves in the world. So this is very, very strategic kind of goal, which has been there for many years, in which they've been planning to go to Iraq. And 9/11 has provided them with the climate of fear, essentially, to kind of go in and project American power into these strategic regions of the world.
Speak up.
2 years have passed and we still don't know, but it may have been the start of the Third World War. Speak Up remembers September 11th. In order to remember the traumatic events of September the 11th, Speak Up asked a series of New Yorkers to share their thoughts and their memories. Chris Knepler is an internet entrepreneur.
So for the first several weeks following September 11th, I had several images burned into my mind and continue to this day, not on a daily basis, but at least every few days or on a weekly basis, see the second plane very vividly going into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. I was standing just a few blocks north and was watching the first tower burn, but had no idea what it was that caused it, just a plane, but didn't know it was a terrorist attack. But then all of a sudden, the second plane came and directly hit the building, and there was a huge explosion. That has been the most vivid picture for me, and for weeks after it, I couldn't watch it on TV, and every morning would wake up with that picture in my mind, and when I would go to the office, which was just a few blocks north, I would see that plane entering the building. A few weeks after, when the planes started flying again over New York, I would oftentimes see one that looked like it was going too close to the city and get a little frightened, or wait and see if I could see if the flight was on its normal path and was actually not going to hit New York or Manhattan.
Karen Brandt is a sex education teacher.
When I think about September 11th and I think about where we are as New Yorkers, I think we're definitely better people for it. I think people came together. I always have thought that New Yorkers were nice people, but I actually think New Yorkers are even nicer people now because of it. It was amazing because right after you saw people just openly crying, and I think some of that openness has stayed with us, and that people are not quite as in a rush as they usually are.
Chris Knepler agrees.
Some things haven't changed in at least New York. It's still a vibrant, exciting, sometimes frustrating metropolis. But I think what has changed is people are a little bit kinder, a little bit gentler. Not always. You still get an elbow in you in the subway train, but oftentimes people are a little bit more friendly and take a little bit more time to, answer people's questions or talk to tourists. But I think it's starting to erase from many people's memories, so they're not as cautious as they used to be, which can actually be a little bit dangerous because we're still possibly under terrorist attacks at some point in the future. And whereas in the first 2, 3, 4 months, when you saw a suspicious package, you would report it, or if you saw a truck standing out too long in front of your building, you'd call the police. It hasn't happened as much more recently, but I still think people are a little bit more on edge.
Rebecca Fabiano is an art and music teacher.
So sometimes I feel guilty that on a daily basis I don't think about the tragedy of September 11th. It certainly had a huge impact on me and my community in New York City and the country shortly following the events of the attack. But since then, I haven't changed the way I live my life. I still go places where there are large crowds. I ride the subway every day. I don't let it impact me in the way that I live my life, although I know a lot of people really had to change the way they live. I heard recently about someone in Middle America who said they were afraid to sleep at night. They had panic attacks. They couldn't leave their house because of what happened on September 11th. And I don't experience that, and I live a mile away from the site. I think that worldwide people responded with a lot of empathy and sympathy, but perhaps once again the United States has gotten involved in something that is perhaps bigger than those of us who live here really understand.
And how do New Yorkers feel about US reactions to the attack? Gary Sturgis is a carpenter, decorator, and bodybuilder.
The guys from 9/11, the terrorists from 9/11, they were here for a number of years before. They intermingled with no problem. They had no problem coexisting here. And I worry about that. I see a number of mosques, I see a number of situations, and I don't disrespect anybody's faith, other than the fact that if you can believe that your religion justifies killing of innocent people, that is ludicrous. And I understand that's extremist, that's not the Muslim faith. Muslims do need to come out more and show what their faith is really about, so more of Americans understand where they're coming from, and Americans can understand that it's not the Muslim faith that brings upon this terror. It's an extremist mindset. It's a male chauvinist pig is what it is from Afghanistan, and that's basically what it is. It's cavemen. Literally.
Rebecca Fabiano takes a rather different view.
I remember that I was devastated when I heard that President Bush had given the okay to attack Afghanistan. My stomach dropped. I was very sad because I knew that this was a beginning of a situation that really has no end. We could continue to look for terrorists throughout the world, but that means to single people out and to stereotype in ways that don't have a positive impact on anyone here or throughout the world. It saddens me that we're in this situation. I think it's tragic. The United States has put itself in a position where they have to win. There's no way that the United States can back down without finding as many people involved in this attack as possible. Otherwise, they lose face. And the United States has always been on top. They've always had to be big brother. They've always had to be the one that wins in every situation. So I don't know that there will be ever a final end to this tragedy.
Speak up.
Are you ready?
For what?
The big opportunity to transform all your talent into real profit is here. It is the time to have your own English school. Do you want to know how?
Sure.
Come and check Planet Idiomas and conquer your financial independence. Planet Compact Franchising is tailor-made for English teachers just like you. With little investment, you can have a quick and safe return. You want to know more?
Of course.
Take a look at our ad in the magazine, Planet Idiomas. Here you can conquer.
Next up, Piers Grimley Evans meets a man with a mission.
Nigel Brown has a job that few would envy. He is responsible for convincing people abroad to eat and drink the products of Britain, the home of the deep-fried Mars bar. But when I spoke to him, he was not at all discouraged. Currently living in Italy, he says people are very eager to eat British food, once they get used to the idea.
The overall perception, you're right, is fairly negative as far as Britain and food and cooking is concerned. I do believe that is, however, changing. I do believe that the quality of restaurants in the UK is helping this move and this change. And in fact, it was just a year or so ago that Gambaro Rosso said that London had the best cooking and the best restaurants in the whole of Europe. So this idea that somehow Britain is a backwater as far as the culinary art is concerned is probably outmoded. That doesn't mean to say that people's attitudes change overnight. I believe we're doing a lot to help that change of attitude by helping the Italians to discover the wealth of the British culinary tradition and the wealth of products that we have and regional products, and showing that we have a genuine regional food culture.
Some highlights of British food, he said, are 360 regional cheeses, biscuits, jams, Highland beef and lamb from Wales and the Isle of Man. He told me how to plan a day's meals that feature these ingredients at their best.
We wouldn't recommend you have this every day, but if you start off with an English breakfast of cereals, something like Weetabix or porridge, it's a great way to start. Then if you follow that with good English eggs, fine British bacon, Cumberland sausages, there's an infinite numbers of fabulous things that you can do with an English breakfast, and then follow that off with wonderful English bread, which you just can't find here, toasted with British preserves, or British marmalades, which is a whole other great tradition from the UK. We would drink with that a cup of tea. That is a great way to start the day, and then you could move on, and since you've had a heavy breakfast, you might decide to have a light lunch, go to a pub and have what we call a ploughman's lunch, which would be a slice of cheddar with chutneys, which chutneys are sweet and sour preserves, which combine very, very well with cheese, which also is linked with our contacts with the Indian subcontinent from where these products partly originated. So cheese, and then wash that down with a nice pint of real ale at lunchtime. And then in the evening, you might decide to have a lovely side of roast beef with Yorkshire puddings and roast potatoes, followed by a delicious pudding. Could be a blackberry and apple crumble with custard, or one of 1,000 different British desserts.
However, in British homes, you're just as likely to find more exotic flavours. The Foreign Secretary wrote in April 2001 that chicken tikka masala is now the national dish, and Nigel Brown agrees. Ethnic food is an essential part of the modern British culinary experience. As almost all ethnic food in Europe comes via Britain, promoting these dishes is also an important part of his job, but it is not an easy task. Luckily, he has no such difficulty with Britain's best-kept gourmet secret, real ale.
The fundamental difference between real ale and virtually all other beer is firstly that it comes from the UK, but more importantly, it is a live product. That means that in the cask, you still have the yeast, and the beer is actually fermenting in the cask. Most beers, when they leave the brewery, are chill filtered, pasteurized, and contain obviously preservatives to make them inert and stable. This beer is naturally unstable. It is alive, it is still fermenting as it travels. And just before serving the beer, the air is let into the cask to allow the fermentation to finish. The beer then becomes clear, it goes bright. When the beer is clear, that means that the secondary fermentation has been completed.
This unique style of beer has now come to many other countries for the first time. It has not been easy. Real ale requires great skill to keep and serve, but it has generated considerable enthusiasm. Italians, for example, through an enjoyment of wine, can appreciate the unique advantages in taste and aroma that come from ale not being filtered or pasteurized. Nigel Brown therefore takes pride that, through his campaigns, he has not only reminded Italy of the tastes that it already knew about, such as single malt whiskey and gin, but introduced something entirely new. Of course, having lived in Bologna for 13 years, after a hard day promoting these products, he tends to prefer Italian food and drink himself.
Speak up.
Chuck Rolando reads David Spanier's Inside Las Vegas.
It remains true of Las Vegas today that the rampant sexuality of the place is overlaid by a thin layer of respectability, like the chiffon on a showgirl. The brothels are not allowed to advertise publicly. Soliciting is against the law. Prostitution has been swept off the streets by the sheriff. Overall, the Mormon ethic, which condemns illicit sex but condones gambling, remains strong in the community. Mormons are well to the fore in civic administration and banking, and casino managers and their minions do not, openly at any rate, procure for customers. Instead, Vegas has something different, the Yellow Pages. No less than 40 half-page ads in the Yellow Pages list entertainment services under saucy names like Desert Foxes or Sophisticated Ladies, with a more or less overt sexual thrust to them. Most of them offer dancers or entertainers ready to fly to the caller's hotel room at any hour of the day or night. I chose Companions, which had a slightly more sociable sound to it. "Do you have a young lady I can talk to?" I inquired of the agency. I admitted that my interest was journalistic, as distinct from seeking a companion. There was a pause at the other end of the line. Evidently, they got calls from all kinds of freaks, but this was something new. The woman's voice, metallic and practical, said she would call back. And inside of 5 minutes, Normandy came on the line. They go in for fancy names, these ladies. Normandy began questioning me. What did I want? Where was I from? She sounded extremely wary about giving me an interview. "There's only one thing I can do," she said candidly. But when I offered to meet her anywhere in town, instead of her coming out to my hotel, Normandy relented. It turned out that she could make use of me as a taxi for an engagement she already had that night at a strip casino. "I could be persuaded," Normandy conceded, adding in the same breath, "So what's your budget here?" We agreed a fee and arranged to meet at a French restaurant of note. How would I recognize her? "I'll be wearing a thigh-length dress spangled with gold and silver sequins," she told me. First thing Normandy did, arriving punctually at the bar, was to ask me for the money. She looked like a gift-wrapped version of a football cheerleader. Shiny, pretty, pliant, immaculately made up, with long silver earrings dangling over her bare shoulders, aged about 24. Normandy turned out to be very self-aware and motivated. "I am not an escort," she began. "That word's taboo. We're hostesses now." What's more, so Normandy claimed, she had recently given up the quick call to a hotel room style of entertaining. She worked now only on straight dating to accompany, as she put it, a gentleman to a dinner or a show. "What happens," she explained, "is that a guy like you comes into town. You look in the Yellow Pages and ring the agency. They ask what kind of girl you're looking for. You know, short, tall, blonde, dark, busty. The variations are endless. Everyone's got their own type. I pass for 20 to 35. There's a very large turnover of young ladies. They're not the most stable young ladies. Some are only working to make enough money to pay their bills or something, you know." Normandy blew in from Florida 2 years ago. She was running a little business down there, which got into trouble. "So I came up here for a month and I saw how easy it was, this life. The money, there's so much money. All this money, it just boggles your mind." She sounded as if it was a fact of life which no longer surprised her. "So the agency bleeps me or calls me on my car phone. I'm always on call. So I ring your hotel room. I say, 'Hello, John. I hear you might be needing some company.' First thing I try and find out what sort of man you are, what you're doing in town, what you want. I check for speech patterns or innuendos. I don't want to run into any trouble or get involved with anyone who's into drugs or intoxicated. So I get an idea what you're like. I explain the agency fee is $125, but that doesn't include something for myself. This will bring it up to $400 or $500, depending how you spend the time, up to an hour. Then I get a reaction from you, find out if money's a problem, find out how much you're willing to spend." Normandy took a sip of her Perrier, and I offer to describe myself. "Some girls deal in quantity," Normandy explained, "depending how badly they needed the money. She went for quality. She prefers to pick and choose. 1 client a day is her usual rate. The agency, in reality no more than a woman with a phone line and a long list of girls, takes a cut of about 1/3. The fee which the gentleman pays is negotiable, earning a minimum of $500 for a 5-hour evening date and usually substantially more. Oh, you want to take coffee up in your suite after we finish dinner? She could easily earn $1,000 a day. When I get to your hotel room, I listen at the door to see if anything's going on. Police may have rented the room posing as clients. They've got several means of entrapment they'll use any way they can. Usually I get an escort to take me through the hotel. It's dangerous for a girl to walk on her own in some of these places. Security will detain you, take you away, and look in your purse. All they find is a credit card stapler and a bleeper, and a packet of you-know-what. They got you. The secret of cruising, according to the black hooker who befriended John Gregory Dunn in his A Memoir of a Dark Season, is to keep moving. Caesars first, then the Tropicana, then the Sands. No luck. No more than 2 drinks in any casino. Stay for more than 2 drinks without making a connection, and hotel security begins to get nervous. The hotels draw a very fine line. They like the girls available for the roller who wants a pop, but then they don't want the casino to look like a lamppost. Or, to take it from the opposite viewpoint, one of the things Maria, the heroine of Didion's Play It As It Lays, would never do, walk through the Sands or Caesars alone after midnight. Normandy sounded aggrieved. They don't want working girls in the hotel who may roll a client. They figure a guy spends $1,000 on me, he might have spent the money in the casino. Sometimes a man gives her money to play with while he gambles. She bets as little as she can get away with and pockets the chips. When I go into the hotel with an escort, I'm safe. I came here with an escort tonight. She gave me a narrow look. I don't know who you are. You might be playing some kind of game. I was remiss, actually, in not asking to see your driver's license. She was a very careful lady, I suggested. Yeah, when you're dealing with life and death, right. Normandy continued, I knock on the door, that's the moment of truth. The guy sees you for the first time. I sit down, we size each other up. I say, gee, I could recite this in my sleep. Would you like to exercise your option to ask me to leave? They usually say, oh no, do stay. That gives the guy a hook. He can say he doesn't want me to stay, this isn't going to work. Okay, no hassle, just give me the taxi fare back home. Only once was Normandy turned down. So I say, we need to take care of the financial arrangements that we discussed on the telephone. I go into the bathroom and take a look around for any sign of drugs. When the money has been exchanged, or the credit card slip signed, and she feels comfortable, she rings the agency. I tell them I'm with Mr. at his hotel room, and I'll ring back in 1 hour, or 5 hours if it's an escort job. It's a ridiculous game, Normandy added, in an ironic self-deprecating aside, shrugging her bare shoulders. Dealing with a total stranger, it can turn you crazy. You don't think about it. You think of something else. I think of it as dating, deliberately, to rationalize the idea of prostitution. I don't think anyone is in this game because they like the work. You're someone else. I can be whatever they want me to be. I'm a chameleon. Some clients are romantic types. They order up champagne and roses. Some people know exactly what they want. We move along swiftly. They pay for my time and my company for up to an hour. It's one conversation in the time. Half an hour is usually enough, and I'm on my way. Normandy's clients range between young and old, 18 to 75, rich and poor. A man might have saved up for 4 months just to get $500. And for some men, money has no meaning. It's a fantasy. Away from home, having a total stranger come to your room, knowing you are going to make some sort of contact. It's dark and mysterious. What do they want? The scope is incredible. Some men just want to have company. A lot of my job is full of tenderness. We might just take a bubble bath together. It might not lead to anything. I'm more of a therapist. A man will tell me things he can't tell his wife. Pillow talk can be very profitable. I've had a couple of stock deals. It's so easy sometimes, so easy. I make my exit. I do it graciously. Here's a hot towel. But after some men, I need to go home and fall in the jacuzzi with a glass of white wine. I need to go to bed for a week. When you are accustomed to her kind of money, it's hard to let it go, Normandy said. She sounded not entirely content with her life. She had given up, so she said, these quick calls because it was too risky. The police were always trying to bust you for prostitution. Normandy found it hard to convey the awfulness, the abject humiliation of being busted, of being 86th, as it's known. There's a knock on the door, the cops come in. Sometimes they'll go and call up the agency to trap another girl. They take you down to the station and book you, and you're thrown into a cell. You're in there with the absolute dregs of society, drug addicts, criminals, penned in. You may be there a couple of hours or 20 hours. They won't let you get to a phone. And you can't get released until you make bail. I'm just lying on the concrete floor. It's horrible. All I'm looking for is a piece of tissue to lay my head on the floor off the filth. When do they let you go? Not until you've not got one shred of dignity left. If a working girl is busted 3 times, she faces 30 days in jail, which may be why Normandy, so she said, was giving up Vegas. She was working now mainly with repeat customers, people she knew, which was safe, and sticking to escort service work. She saw herself as a smart businesswoman. She planned to return to Florida soon, she confided, to run a resort. The agencies are no more than little storefront operations. Their biggest expense is taking a half-page ad in the Yellow Pages, which costs $5,000 a month. An agency might have 100 girls on file and get at least 20 to 30 calls a day. It will make $100 to $150 a call from these girls, who are mostly glorified hookers off the street, supporting a habit or with some kind of personal problem, Normandy said. Agencies became very rich. Normandy, from a white middle-class Midwestern background, was troubled, too, by the big secret in her life. If you rang my sisters and told them what I was doing, they wouldn't believe you. Just couldn't believe it. When I started 2 years ago, I tried to talk to the other girls, to try and share this secret in my life. But I couldn't associate with them. They're so flaky. As I drove Normandy over for her evening engagement, she sounded pensive. I know a girl making $150,000 a year. Money means nothing. She gestured across the gleaming Vegas Strip. I can go in there to the shopping mall and buy a dress for $500, makeup for $200. It's just a lunch. Yeah, but what does $500 mean if you're gonna feel sick afterwards? You know what? I'm thinking of writing a book about my life. We drew up outside the casino. Normandy swung open the door, slithered out of the passenger seat in her glittery sequin dress, and sashayed up the steps without a backward glance.